Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night, 7:07 p.m. Central. You're listening to United Public Radio, and this is our second to the last show of the year. And next week we'll have a show, and then we'll take a break till January 7th. So, and got some good guests for, I know Christopher Golden, which is a big horror writer that's coming on in January. I know Joe R. Lansdale, who's a friend of mine, a big author, coming on in March. So that's a good one. Joe's been on before, but he wrote Hap and Leonard and all that stuff, and there was a series and all that stuff. Michael K. Williams was in it, that dude that passed not too long ago, but Joe's coming back. That'll be a good one. We got Wham here with us tonight, Super Wham.
Hey.
Wham representing tonight's guest, Stephanie Redfeather. Great to have you here, Stephanie.
Thanks so much, both of you.
And your Empath activation cards, Discover Your Cosmic Purpose, they just came out, correct?
They did, November 23rd.
And what's the process for doing that? I mean, I know there's a lot to it. It's different than a book for sure. You're like planning out cards individually, and I collect different cards. I have from Norse to Alien to just Native, you name it. I have so many different ones. I mean, I know there's a process with the art and stuff. How was all that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I was ready to write this Oracle deck a year before I actually started. And because I hadn't done it before, there were questions to sort out, just like what you're talking. It's like, okay, do I find the artist? Does the publisher find the artist? Do I pay the artist? Does the publisher pay the artist? You know, all of those sorts of things. I originally was not intending to do the artwork. And so I had a reading with my medium in January of 2020. And she said, well, Steph, you're supposed to do the artwork. Oh, okay. I am an artist, but I don't lead with that. And so once she said that, it gave me the permission. It sort of opened the portal, and all of a sudden the download, the whole vision for the deck came through. And so, of course, it's a lot easier when you are the artist and the writer, because you only have to coordinate with yourself. And so, but the way the process worked was actually very organic. I started out with a list of, you know, titles or headlines of a subject matter that I wanted for each card. And as the months went by, you know, they would start to coalesce. And what was beautiful is, you know, the universe really supported the process. If there was information I needed, I would happen to watch a show on, you know, Ancient Aliens or something on Gaia TV, and this bit of information would drop in, and I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I need for my card. And then I, you know, go write the next card. But the process for me was an intense 3.5 month creation bubble where I did nothing but write and paint for 3.5 months.
Cool. So it was a very creative time to do the artwork for the cards too. That's definitely a big task, no doubt about it. Mm-hmm. And I guess when it comes to shamanism, what was the catalyst that kind of started you on that adventure, so to speak, on the path of that?
Oh my goodness, on the path of shamanism?
Yes.
Well, I think, you know, the honest answer is I think it was just in my being. You know, if I look back to my childhood and the way that I played and the way that I, you know, loved nature and climbed trees and collected rocks, and, you know, I grew up in the 70s, so I had the little crocheted drawstring bag that had all of my kits of sticks and rocks and flowers and odds and ends of, you know, it was my little medicine bag. But what really brought it into consciousness and became something I pursued is when my spiritual awakening occurred. And so in my, you know, in that dark time where you're just flailing and confused and lost, you know, just in the process of seeking teachers and seeking to understand what was happening, my first main mentor and her partner studied and practiced in the Peruvian tradition of shamanism. And so they took me under their wing, and it just became it was like coming home, honestly. I mean, for me, shamanic consciousness is just the way that I naturally interact with the world around me.
And definitely, like one of the big reasons we do this show is because we've had experiences. And me, I found out about shamanism after a tragic kind of thing. When I was 17, I went through testicular cancer and chemo, and then my dad passed away a year or so later, and I kind of came across those kind of books from Serge Kahali King to was it Jose Stevens? He's been on the show. Hopefully, I just said his name correctly, but I messed up with the Jose and the Jose. But he's been on, and Secrets of Shamanism was one of his books. Serge Kahali King, Urban Shaman, and I've interviewed them, and I just found comfort in that subject matter. And I also had weird experiences with different kind of paranormal type stuff, and started interviewing those kind of personalities to kind of find out, that a lot of people are going through these kind of different things. And basically, kind of the place we're at right now is I live with my fiance, Christina. We're in a kind of chaotic, dark time right now. We were doing hospice care here for her grandmother, and she was 91, and she passed, and we were also taking care of her mother. Well, some fights happened with her mother, and it ended in her mother leaving for Arizona, and this house was promised to us, to Christina, and basically the mother took off, and now we're here with a month to get out, dealing with a real estate guy that we're ignoring. So right now, things feel very chaotic. Like I feel like fear and loathing in Florida right now. So I'm trying to, do the show and not feel crazy at the same time, but it's a lot. And we did finally get a storage unit after looking for one forever. There was none available in Florida because of Hurricane Michael still, like 3 years later, and finally found one in Alabama. And now we're probably going to do an RV, and we have somewhere we can park. And that's what we're kind of doing next week. But it's just been crazy. And a lot of people I talk to right now seem like I just talked to Beazle. He was going, a co-host of mine, and he was going through some dark stuff. It just seems like there's some craziness going on. I mean, it kind of feels like that a lot lately in the last few years with all the government crazy Trump stuff and all that craziness. But even now, it still feels nuts, with COVID and everything. It just feels like kind of a dark time. So shamanism is definitely a path that I've found comfort in. But when it comes to these catalysts, I know you have a book about chaos and things like that. But I'm just kind of curious from a shamanic point of view, how do you view kind of what is going on right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, one of the things that I've studied a lot and worked with is a concept called the shadow. It's, of course, a term from psychology, but, it applies in shamanic processes as well. And the short definition of shadow is basically the disowned or unloved parts of ourselves. And so we have individual shadow and we have collective shadow. And so as consciousness is raising, as humanity is ascending, as our collective frequency is raising, it's like the things that were hidden can no longer sustain the light, if you will, like the intensity of the light, the intensity of these higher frequencies that we're being exposed to are almost literally vibrating these shadow pieces to the surface. Like what was hidden can no longer remain hidden. It's being revealed to be dealt with and healed and transformed. And so, that is a big piece of why it feels so chaotic, because before there was this kind of status quo where we still had shadow, right? We still individually and collectively as a society, as a country, as all of the different groups from individual to global, we still had pieces we wouldn't admit or recognize, things that we suppressed or didn't talk about or pretend weren't there. Now it's all out in the open, for us it forces us to deal with it.
Definitely feels like that, and it feels like my shadow is trying to beat my butt lately, for sure, acting up for sure. But when it comes to empath, And I don't go around saying I'm an empath, but I may have some traits of that, but it's not like something I go around saying all the time or anything. But I think maybe does everyone kind of inherently kind of have that gift on some level? Maybe some people tap into it, maybe some don't, but it's kind of like a psychic thing that maybe everyone can kind of tap into, or is it just certain people?
Yeah, great question. And, my belief is that we are all born with this pattern, with this imprint, however you want to describe it, that we all have this ability to connect with the unseen realms, right? To sense and feel energy, to recognize that we are multidimensional beings. We all have that within us. But at this point in, human development, where we are in our civilization, a lot of people are met with disdain or confusion, like we, make that part of you go away, kind of the underlying message. It's like the messages we receive from our church, from our marketing messages, from extended family, just depending on how we're raised, a lot of the empathic qualities are considered to be weak, or they can get you in trouble. People will take advantage of you, or even things like, oh well, little boys aren't supposed to fill in the blank, or little girls aren't supposed to whatever. And so, it's like the 5-year-old that has the imaginary friend. Well, but the 5-year-old's going, really, that's great Aunt Edna standing over in the corner. And you're like, okay, honey, that's nice. But when you're 10 years old, it's like, all right, that's enough. I don't want to hear about that anymore. And so many of us have to take our sensitivities and shove them underground, turn them off, wear a mask, pretend that we're somebody else. So like you said, we all have those abilities. I really believe that we're all born with that blueprint, but it's just a matter of, it's kind of the internal and external factors, like we talk about nature and nurture. It depends on what your upbringing was, but sometimes, at some point it doesn't matter. Your soul calls you forward into yourself, and you can no longer sustain that inner dissonance of not being your authentic self.
Definitely. I keep hearing a little bit of feedback. I don't know who it's from or what it's from, but just in case, I'm making sure I got no windows open or anything weird. But when it comes to empath, let's say you're in a stressful situation or a chaotic situation, what are some things that you do that you would protect yourself to try to keep your energy, from not getting those leaks in or whatever?
Yeah, my husband and I joke whenever we're out shopping, running errands or whatever. I'm like, okay, shields up, just as a friendly
Shields
reminder to
up.
both of us. Yeah, shields up.
I've used that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but the imagery or what's happening when I say that is I'm checking in with my energetic container, right? We each have our own field. You can think of it as a bubble or a sphere or a cocoon or whatever works for you. That is your personal sovereign space. And so, this is one of the fundamental skills that every empath, and in my opinion, every human needs to learn and practice well is these edges, right? The edges, the boundaries. And so that helps so that I can remember to not take on the energies floating around wherever I might be in public, because it's a common kind of laugh about it now. I used to call it the Walmart syndrome, but I probably shouldn't be using like an actual name of the store. So we could call it the big box syndrome, where you walk into a store, you're happy, everything's fine, and 5 minutes later you're angry, you're screaming at your husband, you're yelling at the kids, you can't wait to get out, and it's like, what happened to me? I was fine when I walked in. And so if you're not careful, you can take on the emotions and energies of everyone around you. And so that's one way, just enforcing your boundaries, your edges. Another thing that I do frequently is just breathing, honestly, using conscious deep breaths to just take a minute to clear whatever I might have picked up.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you got to remind yourself because it's like sometimes it's like I forget or something. You do it naturally, kind of, but not in deep breaths. You
Right.
got to focus. And yeah, Walmart is since COVID is like a George Romero Night of the Living Dead movie. Anytime you go there, it's just a nightmare. It's scary, especially here. I'm sure anywhere, any Walmart, but it definitely reminds me of that when I go to it. Since the COVID situation, and then of course I went there for the vaccine, which was creepy too on a lot of levels. You go to Walmart for the vaccine, but so I'm looking through the art and everything, and what are some cards that stand out to you that you would like to talk to? Maybe pick one, or that you'd like to talk about. Maybe we can go through a few.
Yeah, absolutely. Or I'm happy if you want to pick one. So
Okay.
that's yeah. If you just want to randomly pull a card, we'll talk about it.
Let me see. My deck's actually in the garage. Let me
Okay.
here.
Yeah.
There's some on Amazon that I can do. Let me look at the ones that are here, and I'll pick one.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say I can just shuffle and see what falls out, and we can.
Yeah, do that. I know there's some I'm looking at on Amazon. We'll maybe do some of those later. But go ahead. Yeah, maybe a card that can help with the crazy situation we're in here.
That's right.
Sorry, guys, I'm really freezing. It's cold in my office, so.
Okay.
I'm really
It's all right. It's all right. The weirder the better.
Oh my
Ma'am's
goodness.
using our
Okay.
blanket.
So I'm going to hold up this one.
Okay.
So this is number 25, Heart
Consciousness.
Yes.
It's pretty
And
awkward.
so all of the cards are, in addition to the message, they all have some kind of activity, a ceremony or journaling activity or an incantation to read. And so I just wanted to, mention that. So, heart consciousness, it's funny that this one fell out. This is actually the very last piece of art that I painted. And it's my husband's favorite. And so
I see why your husband likes it. It's cool.
Yeah,
Sure.
we had it printed and put in the house. So,
Nice.
But there's, some of the cards, it's not obvious what the message is by the title, but this one is a little more easy, heart consciousness. We're talking about heart consciousness, right? That so much of our Western world is influenced by value on intellect, right? We're a very industrious country, and if you look at kind of the Western world in general, it's very much about productivity and but there's also elements of competition in there, and always being in action, and trying to remember the westward movement when our country was being formed. It's like expanding and more land and more productivity, and everything is so focused on the left brain, especially because that is the realm of the masculine archetype, and the masculine is the action principle. So heart consciousness is another way of saying bringing in the divine feminine, the right brain process, the softer aspect of ourselves, the part that is creative and intuitive and non-linear, spatial. The right brain and feminine qualities embrace compassion, right, and cooperation instead of competition. And so there's I would say, worldwide movement talking about bringing the divine feminine back in, getting back into your heart. But what exactly does that mean? It really is about recognizing that the mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. And we have forgotten that the mind is not meant to run the show, but we are so overdeveloped, if you will, like overemphasized, over-focused on the brain and the intellect and all of those sorts of things, that we forget that we are emotional beings, we are feeling beings, we are intuitive beings, sensory beings. And so this heart consciousness is really about coming into that place of the balance, right? Reestablishing the balance and claiming the value of the feminine qualities, the right brain qualities, the intuition, and all of those pieces. So I can say more if you want, but I'll stop there.
So basically, just following the heart consciousness instead of letting the mind and the ego throw at you thoughts and feelings or whatever that may, not always be the best to follow, I guess.
Well, and there's a both and. So my philosophy is not vilifying the masculine archetype or vilifying the brain or the intellect. It's recognizing that we need a balance, that they each have a role to play, right? The left brain is the thing that the function of distinguishing ourselves and figuring out edges and boundaries and being practical and 3D oriented. Those are important functions in the human body. That's where, the left brain comes into play, and the rational thought of being logical. But it's not all and only about that. And so, yeah, we have an ego, and yeah, we have our inner dialogue, and there's all of these components that as a conscious human being it's necessary to acknowledge, but to remember that we are the bigger CEO, right? So all of these, if you just think about, the ego sitting at the table, the left brain sitting at the table, the right brain, the inner critic, all of these different parts. Our job is to hear all of them, to recognize and acknowledge them, but then to make our decision from a bigger picture perspective and not just from the perspective of one of those parts.
Gotcha. I sent you that archive of that guy from Breaking Bad if you want to give it to your husband to your email just now. And some guy just came in the chat and put a QAnon thing up. Dude, you better get out of here with that stuff. We don't do that here. Who are you? Get out. No QAnon.
No QAnon.
Yeah, but anywho, well, that's cool. I like if we could do some more cards, a few, that would be cool. I like doing that. It's fun for sure.
Yeah.
So if you want to pick another one,
absolutely. Okay. All right.
It's a SoundCloud archive that I sent you. It's just you hit play and you don't have to do it. Just listen.
Okay. So there's another card that came out. This one is called Worlds. Let me get there we go. Worlds Within Worlds.
That's cool looking.
This is card number 33. And if I may, before I get into that, I do want to share with your listeners that when I talked about my medium telling me that I was the one that was supposed to do the art and I got this vision, one of the pieces that got downloaded was every single card in this deck has either circles or dots as part of the artwork, and those circles and dots act as a transmission vehicle, right? So this is called Empath activation cards. So the energy of the artwork and the messages are very activational, and the circles and dots are what kind of hold the coding, if you will, that get transmitted to each person who works with these cards.
Cool.
All right, so
very cool looking for sure.
Thank you. All right, so 33 Worlds Within Worlds. The basic concept here is, that we are a microcosm of the macrocosm, that the universe resides within us, and that we are also in the universe. And so I'm actually just going to read a few sentences, if that's okay, from the deck itself. It says, "You are the universe, and the universe is within you. Everything is connected through the quantum web. You are at once an individuation of the great creator mind and the creator mind itself. The Oracle of Worlds Within Worlds invites you to expand your field of view and embrace your power as both the creator and the created. The universe is holographic in nature, which means the totality of all is within each piece. You are a microcosm of the macrocosm. Universal consciousness resides in everything, and thus you reside in everything. and everything resides in you. And so this one, really talks about how powerful we are as creators, and talks a little bit, kind of pulls in the concept of quantum entanglement, which says
Quantum entanglement.
The two things that are related can be some infinite distance apart, but whatever affects the one immediately affects the other. Like it doesn't occur through linear time, right? It's not like there's a delay of time where one thing happens here and then there's a delay and then the other thing is affected. It's like this simultaneous effect, because those two things are ultimately connected. Let me see what else I want to say about that. Yeah, so there's a lot more. The messages are actually pretty long when I wrote these. So they're pretty deep and engaging, which I like, actually. Those are kind of oracle decks that I really like, are the ones that sort of pull me in and challenge me and give me a lot of information.
Definitely. And I know one thing I forget to do when you get in chaos and stress, that I try to just, think positive thoughts like compassion, love, and I forget to do it sometimes. I have to remind myself. It's like I just reminded me, I forgot that's one of my techniques. You just kind of, I guess, say the positive word or whatever over and over. Kind of brings the energy in on some level, and changes the vibration. And sometimes I don't think at all. It's just like a crystal weird light bulb vase, and I don't know if that's good either. But you bring in the positive energy. Is that a way that you bring in positive energy? You think thought is like the main way to do that? Is there other ways, or thought is the main way?
There is no one main way and no one right way. It's really just what works for an individual person. I'm a big advocate of acknowledging what is so, and so as a way to move through what's happening and get back to a higher vibrating state. So if I find myself getting frustrated or angry or edgy or just whatever, we're human, right? It happens to all of us. Then I stop. I'm like, okay, what is affecting me? Is there something I'm worried about? Is there something that just happened? That I take a moment to acknowledge that, so that I can then take a deep breath and move through it. Because acknowledging something doesn't mean we're choosing to stay stuck in it, or acknowledging it doesn't mean we're trying to manifest it. It just means recognizing what is.
So would it be like, okay, I felt angry and was a jerk earlier? Is that what you mean by acknowledging it?
Yeah. Maybe I ate ate lunch downstairs and decided to catch the news, which maybe I shouldn't have done, and something, sparked in the back of my brain, and then I go back to my desk and work, and I just realize that I'm getting, the flow is not flowing for me. I'm cranky. I feel my mood changing, and then I stop and go, all right, what is happening? Okay, well, I just watched this, news report, and here's how it made me feel, and and so once you can say it and acknowledge the thing, then you can release it.
Yeah, the news can do that for sure. Like when you see crazy shootings and stuff. Even now with the news, I barely keep up. Well, where I work at a particular site, I have to do news for my job. But right now, I've noticed on the news circuits, they're hyping up the Russia and China like thermonuclear world war or whatever. And who knows? Maybe that's about to happen. I don't know. But they're certainly amping it up right now. That's enough to make anyone feel crazy and gloomy.
And honestly, I'm lucky because my husband has been in journalism. He likes history. He likes politics. And so he's actually my news channel. So it's actually very rare that I watch the news. When I stopped watching the news when I left the military. And so, he knows where to go.
News channel. That's probably better than the news.
Channel. Yes, and so I'm very blessed that way, because he knows where to go to find the truth of the story.
Has he come to you and say, I think World War III is about to happen with nuclear holocaust with Russia and China? Hopefully
Not
not.
yet.
Okay, well, that's good. Not yet. It's definitely crazy. I know I saw one. It was like we were talking about the nuclear option with Russia. I'm like, that's probably not a good idea, whichever way you toast it. But it's definitely crazy for sure. And
Yeah.
keeping that balance during it all. It's
Yeah.
just
Well,
it's
and,
not
you know,
easy.
for empaths, for sensitive souls, it's really important that we, you know, this falls in the realm of self-care. Whatever that is for us. What is true for a lot of empaths is getting out in nature, right? Spending time alone, doing meditation, whatever your spiritual practice is, engaging in something creative, writing, drawing, painting, singing, chanting, whatever these things are that help us
Nature's a good one.
restore our energy. You know, because as empaths, our superpower, if you will, is blending and merging with other people, right? It's natural for us to be a sponge. So the flip side of that coin means it's challenging for us to figure out where we end and the next person begins. And so that is what takes effort, is to learn to draw that distinction. And so for a lot of empaths, being out in nature is a way for us to come back to ourselves, hear ourselves again, distinguish ourselves from all of the noise, the chaos, other people's energy and emotions and expectations.
Nature's a good one for sure to reset, definitely. Wham, anything you'd like to add, Jedi Wham?
I don't know. I don't know.
Is it cold there? How cold is it?
Well, it's cold for me right now. I mean, it's like, you know,
In
New
New
York.
York.
Well, what's happened is it's gotten cold, and now another front is moving in, and now it's damp. So it's damp and cold, and it's so I'm damp and cold.
It's humid and hot, but the air's on, so it's a little better. So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
humidity though is terrible.
Well, I find it interesting. I mean, I find these kinds of parallels interesting. I find it interesting that you live in Kansas City because I lived most of my life in Kansas City. I was born in eastern Kansas and spent much of my early life on a farm in Jefferson County, and had a variety of interesting experiences with the land and my grandparents and but eventually, you know, many years later, after graduating from, you know, my PhD program and everything, I ended up moving back. One of the things that I say moving back, that's interesting. When I lived on my grandpa's farm, there was a tributary of the Kaw River called the Delaware that ran near the house. And I always remember asking my grandfather, you know, why is it called the Delaware? What is that about? You know, because I knew that Delaware was this eastern, you know, state, you know, and it wasn't, and he didn't know, oddly enough. It wasn't until many years later that I found out that it was called that because that whole area where we lived in Jefferson County and near Leavenworth County and into Lawrence was at one time Indian territory where the Delaware Indians were pushed and settled before they were shoved further down south into Oklahoma. But when I ended up moving to New York, I realized in an odd way the Delaware, that was what the Munsee were called. That was not their original name. The Delaware is that they were named that because refugees from where I live now, the Mid-Hudson Valley, refugees gathered in what is now Delaware to escape along a river that had been named for a colonial settler, Delaware. And so they became called that. Mm-hmm. But I actually live now in the homeland of the people that were forcibly settled where I grew up. And I feel like I have come home in a strange way. I am very connected to the ancestral powers here and have been blessed to connect with indigenous people here who never left. It's a lot of people think that there are no indigenous people east of the Mississippi, and that's not true. Many people stayed behind. They just learned how to hide in plain sight. And I've been fortunate to meet whole communities of these people here. And so for me, where I live now, I've been able to, the people here where I live, we know what the place was where I live. Where I live right now was a winter sheltering area for the Esopus Band of the Munsee. And that's for me, all of my spiritual work has brought me back to the land. Whether it's the land on which I sit or my ancestors, some of whom were indigenous, but many of whom, of course, are European. And Jeffrey knows some of my story about, all the various Native teachers that I've had, indigenous teachers, both from here and from Europe.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's not a real formal thing. It's a matter, and I don't call myself a shaman because for me that's an inappropriate term. But it's the two things that I think of, and I just when I think of my connections to things, I think of what my ancestors called women who lived in the woods. Mm-hmm. It was kind of a pejorative, actually, at the time. It became that under Christian rule. But it's the Avithia, the women of the woods, the Avithia. And here, where I live now, the Munsee named for themselves, what they called themselves when the settlers came, was Iliwi, which means we who take counsel only with the heart of the forest. And so that's kind of what I think about a lot of times. Mm-hmm. That's what I connect with. And I don't, I work with my teachers and I don't worry about a system and I don't worry about, I'm just trying to shed all of the external accoutrements of the ideological crap mm-hmm. that has been laid upon me by my background and our middle class white background and all of that stuff, and I just so that's sort of where I'm coming from. It's like I live in a world of dreams now most of the time. If I have trouble, this week has sucked. This week for me has been really hard emotionally for a variety of reasons. And so when life is hard, I just go in and I talk to my guides and I talk to, the light, and I just talk and they tell me what to do. And that's what I do. Mm-hmm. And that's all I do. It's like, I don't even worry about trying to explain it all to anymore to anybody. Whoop.
Mm-hmm. Seems like a lot of people are having crappy times. Like from Beazle, I just talked to him today, who was a co-host, and he's doing better. But it's just in the air, for sure.
Well, and Wham, I really get what you mean about shedding the kind of ideological stuff. It's one of the things that I appreciate about the Peruvian lineage and my teacher is, yes, there's a tradition and a structure, but it makes room for whatever your spirituality already is, right? It doesn't ask you to give anything up. It doesn't ask you to, take something on or, make promises or vows to something that you don't believe in. And so, I think of what I've had a couple of shamanic teachers and I really resonate with just shamanic consciousness, just interacting with the living world as just a natural way of being in the world and living life.
I noticed one of your blurbs is Don Oscar. I always have trouble with his name, Miro Quesado. He's been on the show, and one of my big experiences that I've had is I've seen beings of light, completely sober, leave my house like they were in it in Silver Lake, Florida down here. And it was like they had flew out of my house, like they went through the roof and flew straight into the heavens. And I've seen them many times, and it's been a little while, but I've seen them in the heavens. I've seen one fly through the air like it was freaking something out of a comic book like Superman. Just beings, people made of light. And I had Don Oscar on the show and told him about that, and he said something that perplexed me. He said down there they gather and like have parties and watch the shining ones in the sky, the same things that I'm seeing. And I don't know if they're doing whatever down there, but who knows? If it doesn't matter to me, it opens your doors up with all the plant stuff. But they said basically they're seeing the same things down there and having little festivals around it. So I was like, wow, ain't that something, you know? And that's down in Peru and stuff. I know shamans, they call them luminous beings and things like that, but that's one of my big eye-opener experiences. And part of me thought that was just like God saying, you're freaking out about death so much, let me show you what's really kind of going on. And I kind of think that's what we are. Maybe not everyone, I don't know, or maybe everyone is. Like that's kind of like our energy being that I've been seeing. And the ones I've seen in the heavens in the late night sky is kind of maybe people when they project out of their bodies when they're sleeping and they kind of meet up there. It looks like a big Sims game or something. And it's weird because I've seen like visions up there of it, and that's what it reminds me of, like a weird Sims game or something. But I've seen that, and then it was just kind of an affirmation when he said that, like, wow, okay, so good to know I'm not crazy that people are having weird festivals down in South America and watching these things. But that's one of my big ones for sure, the light beings. And I guess, have you had, I mean, what are some of your experiences that you could recount, that your spiritual experiences or some experiences you've had with different things?
Yeah. So in my first book, The Evolutionary Empath, I talk about the different qualities of an empath and that they express on a wide spectrum for so many of us. And so my gifts, if you will, tend to be more in the perception of energy and emotions. And so, you seem to be a very clairvoyant, like visual person, where a lot of your experiences are visual. Mine don't tend to be visual as much as they tend to be the feeling, the interaction with, or the sensing of energies and emotions and those sorts of things. And so, when I first started learning Reiki, this is when I started discovering that I had an ability to tune into other people's energy fields and kind of naturally tune into the wavelength of their energetic body and emotional body. Whereas some people are more, like medical intuitives, or more like, they can see timelines into the future or into the past. So, all these things express a little bit differently. But, for me, a lot of the cool experiences I've had have just been synchronicities, from time to time, places that I've worked before I started my business, I would, people kind of knew what I did, and they'd sort of quietly in the office, we kind of go off to the side, and they'd ask me a question, and I'd tune in, and I'd share what was coming to me, what I was sensing in their energy and emotions, and I've freaked more than one person out just with what I was able to perceive. But for me, it's that's all information that exists for all of us, right? All that information is encoded, if you will, in our energy fields. It's just a matter of recognizing that we can perceive that and tune into it. For other people, it's like, how did you know? And I'm like, how do you not know?
Definitely. And then for people that have been hurt a lot, it's some of us can cut all our emotions off and try not to feel any of it, because it's like, well, I've felt that all before and it felt like crap. So there's like some instinctual thing that kind of, I don't know, comes up to try to block it or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a coping mechanism, right? I mean, we none of us escape childhood without one or more traumas or woundings, and so these coping mechanisms. I mean, our psyche really is amazing in how it handles and manages these traumas and wounding events so that we can still function in the world. So yeah, of course we have these coping mechanisms, and especially in the Western world where, for children that are sensitive, that sensitivity is rarely encouraged or seen as a gift or a positive trait. And so much of our feeling body, so much of our emotions, we've learned to suppress. And so it's no wonder that we have kind of an epidemic of spiritual bypass, right? Because we all just learned as a coping mechanism, well, I'm going to leave my body, or I'm just going to live up here. It's a lot easier to live up here than it is to live in my lower chakras.
Yeah, that's a coping mechanism. Leaving the body, I think that's one I use a lot. But I had Tammy Billups on before. I know she's one of her animal soul contracts. My dog passed not too long ago, so she was a good guest that had some positive things. I know she left a blurb for you. I was just looking through your blurbs. One of the cards I found recently, I looked on Amazon, Megalithic Gateway. Does that ring a bell? Is that one you could look up? That sounds pretty interesting. Is that like serpent mounds? And I'd like to visit some of those. We're getting the RV, so hopefully we can go to some neat places like theirs, like vortexes and stuff.
Yep, absolutely. It's all of those things.
Megalithic Gateway.
Megalithic Gateway. Okay, so it's well, you can probably tell me more about this than I can tell you, but megalithic sites around the world, they're really becoming more mainstream, especially through different shows like Ancient Aliens and some shows that are on the Gaia channel, where whatever we thought we learned about some ancient sites, we're looking at them newly, right? And just, it's also a testament to how much our consciousness has raised in just 100 years or 200 years, because we're seeing things and understanding things. We have the technology to measure now what the purposes of some of these sites and the structures and the particular configuration. We're also discovering more sites. Now that we have satellites that can map the entire globe, there are certain structures that have been found just by people who have spent months and years culling through satellite data, just looking for, Nazca type lines and, all of these different structures. But what's clear about all of them is they were created on purpose, very intentionally. And I am sure there are magical powers as well, and
healing at Megalithic
healing that's available, portals to other dimensions that are created through these different sites. And so the card that's called Megalithic Gateway is really about, hey, there's a megalithic site out there that's calling to you. And if you have the ability to go visit it in person, do that. But if you can't, you can still buy a book about it, watch a documentary, print a picture off of the internet, and connect with it through dream time, through journaling, because that site has a message for you.
Is that artwork from something in particular, or is that one you just designed on your own, the Megalithic Gateway card?
It is not any particular site that I'm aware of. It is just the design that wanted to come through.
I have a cool book by Gregory Little. I think it's all these native mounds. It's like a green book.
Yeah, that big huge green book, the encyclopedia.
Yeah,
that I told you. Yeah, that's a great book.
That. I need to dig it up. That's one for the RV to have on the RV shelf for sure. Some good ones. Some good ones in there. He just maps out every, megalithic site in America, I think, or North America. But Gregory Little, that'd be a good guest to have on his native stuff.
That's cool. Like for me personally, Egypt is, I resonate so strongly with Egypt, and I've actually had the privilege of being there and plan to go back.
Cool. So how was Egypt? Was it what you thought it'd be?
It was more than I thought. It was life-changing. It was the most magical bubble. Like for 2 weeks, our whole group was just in this bubble of magic and synchronicity. And, we had all these, our fee included a lot of private visits, which means we had to get up very early, but we were able to go to the Sphinx, go to the Great Pyramid, go to different temples before it was open to the public. We were able to do, very small, kind of inconspicuous ceremonies, because technically they don't, allow that anymore. But we would still go do, just very tiny, quiet ceremonies. And I actually had an incredible experience in the birthing temple, in the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, where I just walked in. We all stood in a circle. We were holding hands. We were chanting quietly. And I was shaking. I was holding back sobs. And when we got done, the people on either side of me, I just collapsed into them and started bawling and sobbing, and had this amazing, just incredible experience that I later realized was like a rebirthing, for myself.
Sounds interesting. Was it ever? I don't know. I would like to visit places, but I guess I get worried about stuff like crazy stuff there. Just danger on different levels. Like I've always, like ISIS, not the goddess, the terrorists and stuff like that.
Right.
Things like that. Was it ever scary there? Any?
It wasn't. And I really, the travel company that we worked with is absolutely top notch. They have an incredible reputation. They take care of every detail. And so that's what I mean by kind of being in this magical bubble where I didn't have to worry about anything. I didn't have to make decisions or figure a thing out, or where am I going to go and how are we going to handle this and what do we do if this happens, because that's their job, is to make that magic happen for us. And they just did a brilliant job of it.
Cool. So did you go inside the pyramids and stuff, and inside them, you get to go inside them and everything?
I got to go inside the Great Pyramid. I got to go into the Queen's Chamber and the King's Chamber. Got to lay inside of the, a lot of people call it a sarcophagus. It's, unclear that that's really what it is, but I got to lay inside of that.
They let you lay in the sarcophaguses? Neat.
In the King's Chamber.
King's Chamber, okay.
Yeah, and the most surprising experience for me, actually, for part of it, so we all flew into Cairo, but then we went down to Karnak, and in Egypt, the river actually flows directionally from south to north. So Cairo is downriver, and so we flew upriver to Karnak. And so part of the trip, we spent 5 days on a small boat on the river. And my experience of the Nile River was absolutely sublime. I mean, you talk about ancient mother energy. We actually had the privilege of being able to swim in the Nile. And because we were on a little ship, there were a few of us that were like, we were talking to our guide and said, hey, is there any way that we could get in the Nile for a minute? And he goes to the back, he talks to the engineer that's driving the boat. They just pull the boat over to the side, drop the plank, and we all got to go out and splash around in the river for a while. It was amazing. Such an incredible energy of that river.
The Nile River, that's cool. They let you swim in it. That's definitely neat. Well, if you'd like to take a little break, we'll take a little break real quick, and then you can just come back, and me and Wham will talk about something interesting.
Okay, sounds good.
Just take your time.
All right.
Well, what have I been watching lately? I finished Chucky. That was pretty good.
Chucky? You finished Chucky?
Chucky, yeah. There's a show now about Chucky, the little, jerk doll that doesn't like people.
The poltergeist haunted.
Yeah. The best thing about that is Brad Dourif, though. He is really good. He's an actor. He's been around.
He's fabulous. He's an amazing actor. I mean,
he's the voice.
I personally don't know why he's not more famous than he is.
Yeah, I know. He's been in a lot of good stuff. He's really good. His daughter's in it too, and Jennifer Tilly, and it gets crazy. It's crazy for sure. It's good though. But I didn't realize Don Mancini, the guy that did Chucky the show, part of the reason why he did Chucky the show was because he worked on that Hannibal show and he liked it so much. He kind of like said, well, what can I do for Chucky in a kind of, way like that to, expand on him, and they did the show, and it did really good. They're doing a second season, which is phenomenal for Sci-Fi. Sci-Fi will ace a show in a second. If it doesn't do well, they'll just chop it into pieces. So it's coming back. Resident Alien better be coming back too. I love that show on there, Resident Alien, about the gray alien dude that takes over a doctor's body. But Alan Tudyk is a good one. But let me see. Yeah, after next week, we're taking a break till January 7th. And so one more show and then a break, about a 3-week break, and we come back January 7th. So, and I forget who that guest is. I'll have to look it up. My memory's terrible. But yeah, Chucky show's good, but it's definitely violent. So, but I can't help it. I still like it. But, but Chucky is a little jerk for sure. He's bad. But welcome back, Stephanie. We were just talking about Chucky the show. I'm sure you've never seen it. You probably wouldn't want to. Here's Chucky. Brad Dourif is cool, though. He was in Deadwood and Exorcist 3. He's been in a bunch of stuff, Brad Dourif.
He was also in Lord of the Rings.
Oh, yeah.
He was that Wormtongue, right?
Yes, he's a great actor.
He's such a great actor.
I loved him in Deadwood, and I know I haven't seen that Exorcist in a long time. He's really good in that one. I think it's like the third one or something. That was crazy. But let's see here. Well, Stephanie, what about any weird UFO stuff? You ever seen any weird UFO stuff?
What's interesting is this, the UFO world, the alien world, was never really on my scope until I started learning about and engaging in this Peruvian tradition. And relationship with the star relatives is actually a big part of the heritage, and it's that way with most indigenous traditions, as I'm sure you can attest to, Wham, that the star relatives, our creation stories all trace back to some civilization from the stars, and
at least in part, yes. Least in part.
Star relatives.
And
that could be the light beings that I've seen too. That could be considered that too. That's another perspective.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah, and so for me, I've had a couple of experiences. One of them was where a group of us gathered out in a particular site in Kansas, not terribly far, like, I don't know, hour and a half from Kansas City, and saw lights in the sky. But I've never really had an encounter. There's a part of me that really wants that, but I also know that I don't need it to believe that they exist. I personally feel a very strong connection to Sirius, and I have. I'm trying to pull the cards out right now. In my deck, 3 of the messages are from Sirius, Orion, and the Pleiades.
Sirius, Orion, and Pleiades. Cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there we go. So this is just to show those who are watching. This is the Sirius card.
Okay, cool.
And this one's a little more subtle, the Orion card.
Orion, is that like the archer dude, or what is that?
Yes.
Like the archer guy? Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then this is the Pleiades.
Some of those those symbols look like a Nokian or whatever, sort of like.
They are called. There's a certain set of fixed stars that are also called Bohemian stars, royal Kabbalistic stars, and the ancient alchemists gave them symbols. And so I did not create these. These symbols come from ancient alchemists who created these symbols for these fixed stars.
There's this weird quote in a Jeffrey Mishlove book called Roots of Consciousness. And it was some astronomer from a long time ago, and he said some stars are indeed deities. And I have seen weird stars that seem like they were more than stars, like the light being on, pretty much is what I've seen. Not to say every star is that, but some of them I'm like, they look like it has arms and legs and it's trying to like talk to me or something. But yeah, that's neat. I've never seen those symbols for stars. It's cool. It reminded me of the Nokia and stuff some, but definitely that's I'll have to look that up. That's interesting. The stars and all that. I know lately I've gone outside here a few times just to do garbage or whatever, feed the cats that are out there. They're strays. We help out. But I've seen a shooting star recently that most shooting stars just fall, but this one just went across like straight, like in a straight line and then vanished. Then another night I saw a big one recently that was like a green one and it fell and went into the woods. That may have been a meteor, but it's always spectacular when you see stuff like that. It feels like it's an omen or a sign or something like that.
Yeah, and there's actually another card in the deck that's called Star Bathing.
Star Bathing, cool.
Which is about, just connecting with the celestial realms and the star beings.
There's some out there. I don't know. Do you know which planets are visible or anything right now, Wham? There's one out there that's bright as can be, and it's like really low.
Is that what you're thinking of?
Maybe Venus? Isn't that the brightest one? There's one we've seen lately.
Wow. Yeah, because Sirius is the brightest star in the sky. And I'd have to check. We should be getting to the point where Sirius is visible again in the night sky. Because for a while, since August, since it came above the horizon, you had to get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and now the time is moving on. Now 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock. Eventually, it gets to where, after dark, you can look up to the east and see Sirius. And actually, the way to find Sirius is you find Orion. Let's see if I can do this. And so the 3 stars that are in Orion's belt, if you trace those down to the southwest, it will point to Sirius.
Cool. I know the one that we've seen lately is around this time, and it looks really low and bright, really bright.
Okay, so that might be
Yeah, I think it's probably Venus. Here's hoping for some good energy on the solstice for sure. I'm a Capricorn, so hopefully that time brings in some kind of healing energy from good old Saturn and all that stuff and all that jazz. And then so let's see if there's some more cards. I'm on Amazon checking out the Empath activation cards. And did you ever do anything for the Trickster or anything that rings any bells? Was that in the deck, or was that not anything?
No, that wasn't quite the focus. And so, if I can give just a little bit of a backstory. My original title for this deck was Cosmic Mission Activation Code. And so, this is part of the negotiating process when you have a publisher, is they want to hear, as the author, what do you want to call the word, what title, what subtitle, and all of those things, and then they reserve the right to tweak things. And so my first book is called The Evolutionary Empath, and so you can see that they chose to kind of relate the two, like, the background colors are similar, the fonts and that sort of thing. So my publisher decided to call it Empath Activation Cards, Discover Your Cosmic Purpose. But this deck is really, it's a high vibrational deck. It really does talk about it's more spiritual concepts, but it also draws from science and a variety of different disciplines. And in addition, one of the things that makes this unique is you can use this deck like you would any other oracle deck, right? Pull a card for the day, or create a spread that you want to use for a reading, or however you want to use it. But I created an additional overlay so that you could actually read through this book from front to back, start to finish, and use it as a self-guided initiation into the mysteries of higher consciousness. And so, as I was completing writing the work, the 44 cards started to organize themselves into 4 different groups of 11 that ended up becoming these, what I called initiatory paths. And so there is a progression that happens as you move through the cards sequentially.
Well, they're definitely very cool. I like them a lot. What is Blue Star Temple? It says you're director of Blue Star Temple.
Yes, that is the name of my business. It is not a brick and mortar. When I first stood up my business, I had a different name for it. But several years ago, I could feel the energies shifting. I knew that a name change was coming, and I was just kind of rabidly petitioning the universe to, like, what is it? What is it what ties everything together? What is this supposed to be called? Like, come on, God, I need to know. And so one night I was falling asleep and was startled awake with Blue Star University. And I thought, oh my God, a university, of course. Yes, this makes sense. It ties together this and that, and then like 10, 15 seconds later, I'm like, university? How am I supposed to create a university? So like how that usually goes whenever you get an idea and you're excited and then you're like, how the heck am I going to do this? And so a few days later, they gave me, the name Blue Star Temple. And it's basically, it was an initiation for me. It's like, trust us. This is the first step, and we will tell you what's next when it's time for the next step. And so for me, Blue Star Temple first and foremost refers to my personal connection to Sirius as a blue star. But there's also an overlay of energy from Venus as a blue planet, because I do quite a bit of work with the divine and feminine, feminine energies, and the Earth is a blue planet. So all of those overlays are in there. But for me, Blue Star Temple was I needed a bigger energetic container, if you will. It was like my old name, my work had outgrown my old name, and I needed a new container, a new energetic field for what I was doing.
Are the supposed aliens from Sirius blue people? Because I think I've seen stuff like that. Like the Syrians are like blue or something weird. Who knows if that's true? I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, I have no personal experience with that. So I get feelings and energetic, sensory experiences.
On the front of the book, what is that card that has Saturn and all that on it?
Yes, that particular card.
That's my planet, yo.
This is actually one of my favorite pieces of art because I think it just turned out so well. I just love it. And this is the card that ended up being actually called the Evolutionary Empath.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So
it reminds me of this one little story. I've seen it just real quick. I see those stories like in science articles about planets sending flashes of like rays to each other. I don't know exactly what's happening, but they'll send an energy burst. Like I guess there's something's going on, but it reminds me of that for some reason.
You can see all the kind of the energy signatures of each one of them. But what that really harkens back to is, in my book, The Evolutionary Empath, I talk about my belief is that empaths are here on purpose to help humanity ascend to the next level of consciousness. And so that's where the whole title Evolutionary Empath comes from, that we're not a mistake, right? We're not crazy. We didn't show up on the wrong planet, even though it may feel like it, we are actually here with a cosmic mission. But there's a quote from the movie Moneyball that says the first guy through the wall always gets bloodied. And that's what the experience of so many of us is. Those of us collectively incarnating right now as empaths, we're the first ones through the wall, right? We're the first ones getting bloodied, paving the way for the ones coming behind us.
And it's definitely, well, I think we have some, me and Christina here have some traits. I don't know if we're going to go full blown saying I am that, but I definitely have some traits of it. And the situation here, it's hard when, like, for instance, her family, betrayed her on a lot of different levels. So she's dealing with those wounds and stuff, having family members lie to you. And when you have those kind of gifts, I guess it can be harder on you on so many levels because you feel it more on so many different levels. So finding the balance. And then the situation here, it's like, you were supposed to be out by January, but I don't trust her mom. Who knows what could happen with that? It could be she could pull another card out and, have less time. So it's trying to get it done. It's definitely been one of the craziest stressful things in a while that I've seen for sure. And trying to find that balance. I have to remember to do the positive thoughts more and affirmations. Those help me a lot. Like that, I always mention that creative visualization book by Shakti Gawain. I don't know if you've seen that one, and she passed not too long ago, which I found that out. I was like, damn. But that's a good one. It has some really good affirmations in it that I use a lot. I have like 5 copies of that book. Some of the pages are falling out. But affirmations are good.
I'm wondering if I could offer another practice for you, not to make this a therapy session, but there's something I share with a lot of my clients that, if there is a stressful situation, family members aren't speaking, or, this also works for somebody who's no longer embodied, is to have a conversation with the person's higher self. And to call them in, not as a manipulative tool, but as an opportunity. If you know there's a certain conversation that you could not have in person with the person, or they wouldn't be able to receive what you're saying, or for some people who just go blank, right? They lose their voice, they lose their power, they can't even speak. Yeah. In talking to a person's higher self, it gives you the opportunity to say everything that you want to say. And it's not like you're downloading on it and like, you pissed me off and I can't believe it. That's not what I'm talking about. It's coming from the highest place in yourself to say, I love you. Our human selves are having this issue right now. I want you to know this is how I feel. I want the best for the situation, that sort of thing. And you can talk to the person's picture, or you can use a surrogate like a doll or a statue. So I offer that, to you and your partner, so that if that feels like that might help you navigate.
That sounds interesting. For some reason, I was thinking of a voodoo doll, but no, I'm kidding.
Not what I'm talking about.
I'm kidding. I don't practice voodoo, but I've interviewed them. It's interesting, but I don't practice it. But is there? If you'd like to do a few more cards, we can do that. That's really cool because we've never had anyone really just like kind of read cards and stuff, like kind of like a reading type situation on the show. We've talked about stuff like that, but I don't. Maybe a couple, but not many.
Yeah. Do you have one in mind, or do you want me to pick?
You can pick one. You can pick one. Maybe one that'll help.
Okay. So this one's jumping out at me. It's called the Spiritual Crucible. And this actually has a very personal origin, because when I went through my spiritual awakening, it was about a 5-year period of time where I was just getting leveled, and I called that period the spiritual crucible, because it was like I was just getting cooked down and turned into another substance. And so the spiritual crucible card really talks about how when we go through something that transformative, right? Usually it's the really dark, hard, the intense things that we go through where we really come out as somebody else on the other side. And so, it was my first conscious experience of going through a shamanic death or a psychic death process. But I had no tools for going through it. I didn't know that's what it was called. I didn't know how to navigate it. For people who play with astrology, I have 4 planets in Scorpio, so I have a very strong will, and I was used to, by God and shove that square peg in that round hole, round hole and make it happen. And I had no idea how to surrender. And so the Spiritual Crucible card is also about recognizing that you are dying to an old way of being. And you can fight the process tooth and nail, or you can surrender and go with it. But either way, you're dying.
Yeah. Either way, you're croaking. That's true. For sure. That's a big one. That's why I think I've seen the Wings of Light. It's like something saying, would you chill out about that? Here's what happens. And I'm still freaking out about it. It helped, but I'm still freaked out about it. Good old, these are cocoons. We're going to leave the cocoon, like Ron Howard's Cocoon. I know I've brought up that movie 5 million times.
5 million times.
5 million times.
5
With
million times.
Steve Guttenberg, baby. That's right. That's Opie was on to something. I'm telling you, with that movie, there's something to it. Ron Howard. So off the cuff, Wham. When it comes to crappy energy or terrible, dark, crappy energy, what do you do, like to get your energy to?
It really depends. It's been different at different times. And I have a different understanding of what crappy energy is to me than I used to. Crappy energy was just anything that was unpleasant, and so you seek to just get away from it as fast as you possibly can. I have the nematodes response. And now it's like there are some types of crappy or unpleasant, energy that it's actually really important for me to sit with. And so in the last, I guess it would be the last month, because I'm going through actually a very controlled series of practices that are lasting for 2 years. I'm like a third of the more than half of the way through the first year, and losing track of time. 2020 and 2021 have been, and for the past month, it's been very important for me because of what's been coming up. It's been very important for me to just, instead of trying to get away from unpleasant feelings or just what arises, it's very important for me to be in a safe place and just write it out. Just sort of let it all, like waves of water, just sweep through me and just, because the truth is that eventually the body transforms it changes, it becomes something else. Or your body says, I'm done with this now, I'm going to sleep. That's the other thing it does. It's been a very interesting experience to do that and not really apply a lot of mental stuff to it, but just sort of let that happen, because there have been some very interesting openings that have occurred because of that, and some very interesting things that I've been able to let go of that I haven't been able to let go of, because I don't have to let go of them. They're transformed, actually. They're changed. So, it depends on what the crappy thing is. It's,
Yeah.
And like I said, it's changed at different points in my life. So, I haven't found that it's always good to just throw light at it, because a lot of times that dark stuff is me. That dark stuff is my stuff. It's not necessarily, there's not necessarily anything wrong with it. And it may only be dark because I'm unfamiliar with it, or I've been taught that it's wrong, or I've found that there's not a lot that's actually dark in the kind of classic dark sense. There's some things feel dark to me only because I realize that what it really means is that my ego needs to let go of it. It's not that it's dark, it's my ego thinks it's dark because my ego doesn't want to let go. And then there are truly dark things because some people have chosen to turn away from the light. And that's different. And that doesn't have anything to do with me. So, and that's a whole other discussion. But so that's, I don't know if I'm making any sense. But anyway, that's the way I look at it.
It does. One thing I've used, I think I've done this too much, and hopefully it's a good thing, is the smartass approach. Kind of like, I'm depressed. Well, I kind of like that, feeling depressed. Or I'm sad. Well, I kind of like it. That I'm so goth, which I used to get accused of being called that, but now I'm just kind of like an old redneck. But yeah, just do the goth thing. I love sadness. It's great. But then, from conversations with God, and I've interviewed Neil Donald Walsh on the show, he kind of says some things like, you can't know, life is knowing all of these things, and you can't really know happiness unless you know sadness, or light or dark or whatever. You got to know the opposite to know the other one, so that kind of approach. But the smart ass kind of goth approach helps, but maybe sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it does. Just kind of go with it.
I think, similar to the fact that, this country and I can't say about other Western civilizations, we're not very good at dealing with death, of giving ourselves time to grieve, of, everything in the death process is very detached. Somebody else handles the body, all of those sorts of things. But it's like anything that is heavy or sad, or like you were saying, Wham, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. Sometimes we have to do those things, but I think in this country there's sort of this aversion as well to, oh no, we want to sprinkle it. No, we need to make you happy.
Well, yeah, because it's like we're terrified of death, and it's like, I mean, death to me is not the issue. I've almost died 3 times. I have experienced so much death in my life. So many people I know have died. I mean, by the time I was 24, I had witnessed the death and burial of 64 people, that were close to me. Death is not the issue. Death is normal. Death is a blessing sometimes. Death is a great liberator, just what it is. But we're terrified of it, and it makes us terrified of life. It makes us terrified of all of the things that we could do to help ourselves change into being what we could be. If we just understood that death is just a doorway, and that doorway is always open, which means that, you can step through at any time, but then also folks from the other side come and step through and talk to us all the time. It's not like this immutable sort of, solid wall. Anyway, we're just never alone, and we just think we are, and it's bizarre. It's just bizarre. Very lonely people we are.
Yeah. I guess my big thing with death is if it's a revolving door that just puts you right back here on Earth, then I'd like to have some other choices. Nothing against Earth, I love Earth, but this society and stuff, I'm not sure I want to do it again, or just the way everything is now is just crazy. I'd rather go to some other planet and be a reptoid or something. I don't know. Lizard King, that's right. That's where Jim Morrison is now. But and death, I understand that our society, especially America, is so weird with it. A lot of people, they celebrate it. Over here, there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. Well, I mean, it just depends on the situation, I guess, for sure. With death and everything. Well, if you'd like to do any more cards, feel free at any time. I like that for sure. And let me see. People keep appearing in the chat. I got rid of the QAnon guy, so.
Well, actually, I'd like to highlight something that I think is really cool that I had nothing to do with, that my publisher did. So there's this card.
Okay.
And it's, let me hold it up a little longer.
Geometric, like a geometric kind of pattern, sort of.
Like a mandala. And so this is card number 15. It's called Mental Discipline, which I'll talk about in a minute. But you'll notice, if you get my deck and you open up the box, you see this? They took that image and they stripped the color out of it and made it white, and they put it on the inside of the box, and they put it on the spine, and they put it on the spine, and they put it on the back of the book. And so, I didn't get my author's copy. Like I knew what the cover looked like. I knew what the back looked like because they send me these things. But I did not have the whole box. I didn't know what the whole thing was going to look like. And so when I got my author's copy the first time and opened it up, I was practically speechless because I went, "Holy crap, there's a portal in my deck."
It's neat looking. It reminds you of those weird water symbols, like with the water experiments.
My publisher put a portal in the deck, which I think is amazing, and just falls in line with so much of the theme of just the cosmic energies and the multiple dimensions. So the mental discipline card itself speaks to the fact that if we look at the amount of stimulus and information that we are exposed to on a daily basis, compared to even 100 years ago, if we transported somebody from 100 years ago to today, I think they would just choke and like just be completely overwhelmed and shut down from the sheer immensity of all the news channels, all the places you can go on the internet, all the billboards, just information overload, choking on, and a lot of it is noise, because just because it's information doesn't mean it's correct, doesn't mean it's useful, doesn't mean it's really relevant to you. And so this mental discipline card talks about the fact that, especially nowadays with how bombarded we are, it is important, this is an aspect where the mind, the left brain, if you will, is the ability to focus is so important. So it's kind of like in my early years of my spiritual awakening, I studied Buddhism for a while, and they have a lot of amazing mind training practices that help you focus on what's important, right? To discern what is relevant and useful and a worthwhile investment of your energy, and then what to just invite out of your field, or to not let bother you or influence you.
Definitely. And that's the symbol you designed, right, for the art and everything?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's neat for sure. For some reason, it reminded me of those water vibrations by that doctor or whatever,
Oh,
they sound in water. Yeah. And it reminded me of that. That's interesting for sure, that those different patterns that come up and everything. Mm-hmm. So,
can I add another piece about this one first? Because
sure.
There's another element to this that just felt important to share, which is also so it's mental discipline to apply to external things, but it's also mental discipline to apply to our own internal landscape. So for a lot of us, we're not aware of our own mental chatter. We're not aware of how we talk to ourselves. We're not aware of how abusive we are to ourselves. And so this mental discipline card also speaks to becoming aware of what is the inner dialogue, what are you saying, what is the source, and how do you talk to yourself, and learning to interrupt, to understand and interrupt those patterns as well, to still the mind, as you will.
And I noticed here that your book, Evolutionary Empath, international bestseller. Wow, that's huge for sure. International bestseller. Wow.
Yeah, it has been an amazing ride. It was, being my first book, I really threw myself into it. The several months leading up to its launch were really intense, and I ended up getting a really bad sinus infection. So I was sick for a month, and sick right up to, during my launch date, and after the launch date. And so I got up the morning that it launched, just feeling like crap, and I'm like, it'd be really cool to hit #1 on Amazon, but my gosh, I don't even know if I have the energy. I didn't know in my mind what it would take, how this was going to work. I go to Amazon, Bing, #1 on Amazon in one of its categories. I checked
Cool.
Canada, I checked UK. It was #1 on multiple countries' websites, and it was a humbling experience for me, because in a way it was like Spirit saying, "Listen, you put the work in. You did what you needed to do to get it out there. Trust that the work has a life of its own, and it will get to the people that it needs to get to."
And then it got translated in a bunch of different places too. That's
Mhm.
big
Yeah,
for sure.
it's available in Dutch, German, and Hungarian. And there's also an audiobook, which I had the honor of reading. So if you get the audio book, it's my voice that you'll hear.
Cool. What are you planning anything for the future that you can talk about, or what's going on in the future?
I have so many ideas that I need to clone myself about 6 times just to just to deal with. That's one of the things where it's like, when I talk to Spirit, it's like, okay, help, help. What do you want me to do first? What do you want? So I am actively in conversation with Spirit right now as to my next work. I have a couple of ideas, and things aren't, like the signals that I usually get to let me know, bing, that's it. I'm the lightning bolt. That moment hasn't quite happened yet. So I'm still playing with some different ideas, but I'm always developing. Like I've got a mystery school that I've created around the Oracle deck that's launching February 4th, where it's going to be, each person is going to be able to kind of personalize their ascension process, if you will, during the course of this mystery school by the cards they choose in the deck. But we're also going to talk about, tools and practices for learning how to handle the 5D frequencies, how not to get your butt kicked, how to what those ascension symptoms feel like, just learning how to be a multidimensional human being. And a big part of that is being gentle with ourselves, because it is not an easy process. So I've always got workshops that I'm creating, workbooks. I am guests on a variety of telesummits, and so I'm always creating something.
And you were an Air Force officer before all this, taking this journey, or was that journey? What'd you do there?
What did I? Yeah, in what feels like a whole nother lifetime ago, because people who know me now are like, "You were what?" But it's a part of my personal history. I was actually a very creative, intuitive child. I danced and sang and performed and all of that kind of stuff. And then fast forward a few years, and I get a degree in applied mathematics and become an Air Force officer. So there's definitely a whole story there. So I was an intelligence officer. So, can't talk much about what I did, but I was my first
UFOs, I bet.
No, none of that. No, I can say that I didn't have anything to do with that. But my
Project
first
Blue Book.
right. I was stationed out at Beale Air Force Base in California, where the U-2s were stationed. So I supported the mission of the U-2s for about 3 years, and then my next assignment was at STRATCOM, which was off at Air Force Base in Omaha, Nebraska. And so, different level of work there. And then my last assignment, I was an ROTC instructor at St. Louis University, which is actually a cool full circle moment. When I was in high school, I applied for the Air Force Academy and didn't make it. And, thank God, because knowing myself the way I know myself now, I'm like, ooh, I would not have done well there. So my backup plan was to apply for an ROTC scholarship, which I got, and, went to university. Well, it's Missouri Science and Technical School now. They renamed it from when I went there, and went through ROTC while I was getting my degree. And so it made sense for me at the time, because that creative, intuitive part of myself I shut down when I started to enter my teen years. And looking back at in hindsight's always 2020. If I frame it in terms of the masculine and feminine, my feminine was feeling very unsafe in the world. And my masculine came in to the best of his ability and said, I'll save you, and took her and put her in a box and put her away for safekeeping. And so you can almost chart in high school feminine expression going down, masculine expression going up. And so by the time it was time for me to start making decisions about my career in adulthood, it's like, yes, I'm going to be very practical. I'm going to get a math degree and I'm going to go into the Air Force. And so, yeah.
What was the animals book? Was it Stephen Farmer and stuff? Was that just like Animal Spirit Guide book? You contributed to it or something? I see it on your bio.
Yes. So I have a copy. These are on pre-order right now. So there's when I was launching The Evolutionary Empath, my first book, in addition to my publisher's marketing efforts, I also hired a conscious marketing company to really knock it out of the park. And that company, is called Sacred Stories. And so my friends over at Sacred Stories have created this amazing, it's a series. This is the first book in the series. It's called Common Sentience. And so these are all multi-author books where people contribute, real life stories that are based on the theme. And so I've got a chapter in this animals book, and it's called Personal Tales of Encounters with Spirit Animals. And so I had an amazing experience with owls that came to bracket the writing of my first book, The Evolutionary Empath. And I won't give it away. I started to say, but it's a really cool story that involved owls. And so there's multiple books in this series that are going to be coming out over 2020. This is the only one so far that I have a story in.
Cool. I'll have to check it out for sure. I saw a fox recently with Christina, and I think it was at the graveyard. That was pretty cool. It's not something you see all the time. It's a fox. At first you see its eyes glow, and then you saw its whole body. She has a lot of owl experiences, like crazy. It's like I never see them. She sees them like all the time. I don't think they like me or something.
I have a lot.
Oh, I did. Yeah.
Are a big, just birds in general are a big spirit animal category for me. So.
One time we were on the back porch here, and this was kind of creepy. For some reason, I brought up Lilith, that whole story with Adam and Eve and Lilith and all that stuff, the weird stuff with that. But I brought it up, and suddenly out of nowhere, heard a crazy owl noise, like one of those. I don't know. I forget what she said, what kind it was. I don't remember, but it was just creepy because I said that name, and then suddenly this noise, like, rah, rah, rah. I was like, what the hell? It's kind of eerie. It was actually scary a little. Like, I'm not going to say that name anymore.
Yeah, I find that the animal kingdom and the natural world give us so many signs. Like whenever, especially if I'm doing workshops or anything outside or shamanic ceremonies or initiatory processes or whatever, there's always some amazing synchronous thing that happens with nature.
That's good. And the way the Earth's going right now, so many of those creatures are being harmed by the craziness that's going on and extinction events, and it's definitely at a perilous time on the planet. That's why I like to have interviews like this and with medicine people. Hopefully it helps somehow raise consciousness, and that's what I kind of think this is about. And I've actually had a weird experience that kind of verified that for me. When I started out doing this, I was having trouble getting interviews after doing okay with them, but no one knew who I was, and I said a prayer and then had a weird UFO sighting, and then the next thing you know, I'm on the phone with Stanton Friedman, nuclear physicist, about UFOs, and Nick Pope, all these big UFO personalities from all the documentaries and stuff. It was like it was connected to the UFO sighting. It was weird. It's like, here you go, ET phone home, buddy. And it was like a connection. So that's why I've always thought this is about raising consciousness. And your cards definitely seem like they help a lot with that too as well.
That's the intention.
That's manifested for sure. Well, we got about 10 minutes, maybe do a card or so or whatever we can fit in.
You bet. Minutes. Do you want me to pull it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Just had it. It's hiding from me. All right, here we go. The cosmic egg.
Cool.
And so the cosmic egg is actually a concept that you find in a lot of creation stories and creation myths, that for each tribe or culture, that their creation story often goes back to some kind of void space, the cosmic egg. So of course the symbolism of the egg is the womb space, the cosmic womb, the birthing. So there's a couple of meanings in this card if you draw this card. So one is, are you at a point in your life where you're being asked to be okay in the void, right? Because especially, again, I keep going back to the culture and society that we were raised in, which is more like, you need to be in action, you need to be doing something, you got to make it happen. And we're not good at just sitting with the unknown and sinking into the natural rhythms and cycles of things. And which means there's natural lows and natural highs, natural lulls, right, and natural times for action. And so being in this void space is actually a very fertile place. It's kind of the space in between the ending of one thing and the beginning of the next, where the DNA, if you will, of the next version of you, or the next chapter of your life, or the next thing you're trying to bring forward, is actually baking and gestating. But the other meaning of this card is recognizing that you have the power to write your own creation story. So it invites you to look at what is the story you told yourself about your life, or what is the story you told everybody who knows you about, this wounding happened, or this bad thing happened to me, or we kind of get stuck in our story. And so the cosmic egg invites you to realize that you can rewrite, if you will, your creation story.
Cool. Definitely interesting for sure. And I've heard the universe call it an egg and things like that. A lot of symbolism there for sure with the egg. I had this thing, I watched this, I forget this mythology guy on YouTube that makes cool stories about we watched Carnanos last night, which is the horn god from Celtic and stuff. And then there was one that was like Native American, had the Wendigo and some weird lady with a razor finger that was really creepy. But there was this one story about a thunderbird that would come down and fight a serpent creature in native folklore, and it was just a weird story about Thunderbird fighting this weird horned serpent that had a jewel in its head from I forget which tribe or whatever. But then I came across on YouTube the story of in India their kind of belief system, and it was about Garudu that being coming after the Nagas and eating them, and a weird story where it was kind of similar to the Thunderbird story, and it was just kind of weird, like a weird synchronicity that was weird and neat. I liked it, but but it had some, it was just telling the story of the gods and stuff, and it had the Garuda made a deal with I forget who it was, which god, Shiva or something, one of those, and he would be at its mount, and the dude would ride him, and they became friends or whatever, and got eternity. There's a weird story about the Nagas and immortality. It was just a cool story that was a parallel to that weird native story about the Thunderbird and the serpent. And I was like, maybe there's something to that. There's lizard people underground, I know, in the hollow earth. But I see so much crazy stuff about that. But I mean, there may be something to that, but I think sometimes it gets a little over dramatized or something. The reptilians. But it's neat how different cultures have parallels with their stories. Like in Norse, you have dwarfs, and natives have little people. Like there's just weird things that are similar. So, and one of my biggest, weirdest experiences that I had one time with a friend, Brian, I saw 3 little hooded beings in the woods, and there was a black box, and we both were like, do you see that? Yeah, do you see that? Affirming that we both saw it because it was so crazy. but a cat jumped towards them and they vanished. And during that time, I had been reading stuff about the Celtic otherworld and weird stuff. I don't know what they were, but the black box always creeps me out trying to figure out what that was. Some kind of device. But it's just neat how different cultures have all that stuff. And, well, I guess, well, first off, we got about 4 minutes. It's been really great having you on, and I've tried to definitely ask questions to help with this crazy situation here. And if you do any prayers or meditations, and wham too, do shoot electric lightning bolts at us or anything you can do right now, because it's been crazy. Now this time we have to pack like crazy nuts and try to get out of here before God knows this time clock that's ticking. It's just the craziest thing. And then look for an RV. It's just insane. And her mom is like a Darth Vader villain that who knows what she's going to do next. Sweet man. We haven't had no eviction notice so far. But the problem with the mother, not to get into this too deeply, she was hitting the grandmother. That's why Christina, who's a nurse, came here to do hospice. She was being abusive. So the lady's always been abusive. Just a bad thing that, it's just been bad. But just shock us witchy if you do any meditations or anything. But what's your websites? You want to plug out any websites?
Absolutely. You can find me at bluestartemple.org. And there, the 3 pillars, if you will, of my business. I work with clients one-on-one. I teach classes and workshops and programs. And then the third leg is all of my products. It includes books, oracle decks. I have meditations for sale, workbooks, video home study courses, all of those sorts of things. So the best way to stay in touch with me is to get on my mailing list. So if you go to my website, I have a free gift available for you. It's called 11 Self-Care Must-Haves for Empaths, Lightworkers, Starseeds, and Wayshowers. I also have an Empath Facebook group if you're so inclined to be part of that community. So bluestartemple.org or search for me on Facebook. And those are the best ways to stay in touch with me and everything that I've got going on.
All right. Well, we appreciate it so much. It's always a blessing to talk about shamanism and these subjects. It was helpful. Definitely. My energy out there before the show was like, oh God, but now I feel a little lighter. So hopefully I've been zapped a lot. So we appreciate it, and thanks so much. And thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you both.
All right. And if your husband wants to check out that Jesus dude, he does talk about weird UFOs and Bigfoot, but he is from Breaking Bad. He is from Breaking Bad. So.
That Jesus dude.
It's funny because there's a show called Reservation Dogs, and it's by the guys that did what we did.
That's like a great movie too.
Yeah, and there's these 2 little people named Mike and Funny Bone in that show, and they're singers, and they were on that singing show with Howard Stern's the judge or whatever. And they did a rain dance, and there's these little dwarfs. Their name's Jesus, and he's Jesus. But some of them may be Jesus. He's Jesus, but others people kind of say Jesus, but he goes by actual Jesus. But they're all friends and hang out at the same time. Like 3 dudes named Jesus at the same time.
Like Bob, and Bob.
Like a really big dude and 2 little dudes. Like I'm sure it's like I need to come hang out with y'all. Go to a powwow or something. But we appreciate it. Thank you, Stephanie. Have a good weekend. Thank you, Wham, and thank you everybody else. And thank you, JoJo, wherever you are, probably at the Alien Casino on Jupiter.
Bye, JoJo.
Bye, JoJo. Yeah, he's in deep space. All right. Good night, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Good night.
I'm gonna watch Krampus. It's a horror movie, but I'm still watching it. It's good. But take care, everybody. Good night.
Bye.